Thank you.
Thank you. So, Barbara, I'm sure you're aware that Magnus really praised you justly for being such a fantastic and inspiring person. While we're settling in, I'll just say he described briefly how you went through the journey from a necessary approach to deal with the problems of crime and littering and an unattractive place, and how you've been leading and accompanying this development for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
You started when you were 10 years old.
I color, you know, all those tricks we learn with age. You know, I didn't start when I was 10 though.
So nevertheless, the stage is yours now. You know, we're very much looking forward to your story. That is the one, two right there.
But how do I point with this one right here?
The low one. You see, there is an arrow. I'll switch you. Yeah, that's one.
This one? And
yeah.
No, that changes it. The point.
So what point, pointer. Yeah, that's the pointer.
Oh, got it. Good morning. Okay, sorry it's taken me a little while to get together here. I'm happy to be in Sweden again. I'm falling in love with your country. Thank you, Magnus, for finding me and making me your friend and bringing me to your country. This is my 3rd time in Sweden, and I am really enjoying myself. I love to talk about business improvement districts, and so today I'm going to bring you through our journey before we were a business improvement district, how we became one, the reasons for becoming one, our formula that we used to collect our money, some of the problems we encountered, where we are today, where we're going, about criticisms, all in about 40 minutes. So if I talk too fast, you know, slow me down. I will stop and go a little slow, because some of this stuff I want to make sure you understand, particularly since you are looking at bid inspired and bid like, and I believe you should be bid only. Okay, so there are 74 business improvement districts in New York City. And basically, New York City defines a business improvement district as a public-private partnership in which property and business owners elect to make a collective contribution to the maintenance, development, and promotion of their commercial district. This happens because there's enabling legislation, and you should look at it that way, that give the property owners the ability to self-fund themselves, to self-fund. The commercial tenant receives the assessment if the property owner decides to pass it on. All of them do not do that. Sometimes if they charge a higher rent, they just collect it themselves and pay it. But they're the ones who receive the bill whether they have a tenant or not. The typical services are clean and safe, public safety, business development, marketing, capital improvements, landscaping, and community services. The bid legislation actually started in 1970 in Canada. It was a small area called Bloor West Village, and they had a concern that when the city made improvements with transportation and there was no longer a stop in Bloor West Village, that whole community was going to go under. So they decided to self-tax themselves, to collectively do a promotion so people would still stop and get off the train. Then they went to the city and asked them to match the dollars. Of course, the city said yes, because they didn't think they would self-tax themselves. But they did, and then that was the beginning of the bid movement, and it grew like wildfire. In the United States, in 1974, New Orleans, it was the first business improvement district. And then New York State and New York City adopted the enabling legislation in 1981, 1982, and today we have 74 bids representing 85,000 businesses with over 1 million employees. The first bid, if you've been to New York City, was in Union Square, that's 14th Street, then Washington Heights, 3rd Avenue, the Hub, Times Square, and 125th Street in 1993. So bids were started initially for distressed communities in New York City. It wasn't until after the 1970s when New York City was going under from the whole economic spectrum that was happening in the United States. They looked for programs that could help them come together. And they saw the value of small bids small communities could put their money together collectively, what could they do if they put their money? And that's when we got what we call super bids, like Times Square, the Downtown Alliance, who have budgets as much as $16 and $17 million. Benefits, and these are going to go quickly, but I definitely think you should know them because you don't really appreciate them until after some years. Promoting business development, improving the quality of life, making neighborhoods more inviting to businesses and residents. One of the things that my owners always told me, if it's not clean and safe, nothing else makes sense. We don't want to hear about all these promotions and all these cleanup and beautification if we don't have it where when our tenant come in, they can see that there's an active environment for improving the area. Targeted programs, that's really key because targeted programs is not about going out duplicating what you see other bids doing. It's about looking deeply at what your needs are and developing programs to meet those needs. And over the long run, it promotes long-term economic development and help the district to grow. Why a bid on 125th Street? Well, you can see behind these blocks, this is what we looked like in 1993. Every day, all of the businesses open up to this. And so the area was not seen as stable, and it also was not a place for long-term businesses. So we always had a low vacancy rate because it was the only commercial strip in Harlem, but it was the retail mix and the types of stores, like a oversaturation of fish markets, oversaturation of fruit stands, jewelry stores. The quality tenants were not there. We also had high unemployment because we were just coming off of the drug war that had happened in Harlem and the high crime, no initiatives for small businesses, and the quality of life was really not good. Not to mention the infrastructure was poor. So we started off in the early 80s, and I was not there then, as a merchants association where we collected dues and they did basically holiday lights and promotions. And then in 1985, it became more of a formal organization where we tried to do some clean programs with homeless shelters, promotion, holiday lighting, and we had a better financial structure, membership dues, contributions, and grants from the city, but it still wasn't stable enough. And then in 1993, we created the Business Improvement District, and there we have assessments, grants, and contributions, and we do more targeted programs. 125th Street first started off with the $17 million street reconstruction. That was when we came back. Trolley cars were removed. We had the track still in the middle of the street. We got new water mains. The infrastructure underneath was redone, decorative sidewalks. And so having a program before you become a bid is important. We accomplished two things. We got the street done, and we created the Business Improvement District. So problems encountered with the Local Development Corporation. Never had enough money, difficult getting contributions. City was phasing out the grants. The programs would start and stop. We would lose participation from businesses. The cleaning programs did not have enough impact to keep people coming to the area. Promotions didn't bring people into the store. We had inadequate staff. We put more time in administration than running programs. We had a total disconnect with the community, and it was difficult to get the city to listen to us. They wouldn't take our phone calls. So we decided, out of no choice, literally, to create the bid, because the bottom line is a bid is triple taxation. The property owner pays once, he pays twice, and then here comes the bid. So why should I do this? What we saw was other areas was doing it, and the reason is because are you going to sit around and let your business go under because the city is not doing what it's supposed to do? And then you are also having an opportunity to shape what you're going to spend that money on. So this is the key area on creating a bid. Adequate database, organizing with your owners and having meetings and need analysis, looking at what the district really needed. When we first started off, we thought we were going to create a bid from river to river. After looking at the makeup of the district, we realized that the central core was the only area that really generated enough revenue to pay an additional assessment. And we had to change our boundaries, target area, and we had to come up with the formula. Looking deeply at the formula, we realized that our properties on the corners had small front footage and larger assessed value. And so that small property owner did not want to pay the same amount as the larger. So we eventually had to come up with a formula that would service all the different types of owners, particularly if you have one owner that he's also the tenant, you have one owner that owns 4 or 5 properties, you have a smaller owner. How do you come up with a way that they all pay and don't feel that they're paying a disproportionate share? After you get all of that together and get a district plan, then you have to prove to the city that you want to pay an additional tax. The city left it up to us to prove to them that they wanted to do that. And so we had meetings where we invited the city in where they could hear what the owners would say. And once you met that test, we go into the formal approval process. New York City has what they call universal land use review process, which starts at the community level. Every city agency review it, every borough board reviews it, then they go to city council hearing. After you go through all of that, there's a ballot that goes to the owner for not to vote for, just objection. That's when you get, if you don't get 51% objection, you become a bid and the mayor signs it into law. It is then a voluntary law that becomes mandatory forever, okay? It's a long process, but it's serious. So let's just talk quickly about Harlem. Most people know the history of Harlem and their culture, the culture back in the Harlem Renaissance, and we had a lot of activity going there, which sets the stage for why we always want to have the culture. It was after the Harlem Renaissance when the whole drug scene started, and that was in the 70s, late 70s and the 80s, and we inherited 125th Street in the 90s to try to clean it up. Harlem also, which most people don't know, is 3 distinct neighborhoods. And this side right here is where Columbia University and City College is. And so it's really heavily influenced by education and no taxes, which is why we cut them out, because they didn't pay. Now they want to pay, and you can volunteer to pay, but the city needs to receive a letter from those who are tax exempt. The central core is where we have a retail focus and cultural. That's where the Apollo Theater is. That's where we generate most of the traffic. And then on the east side, East Harlem is a heavily Hispanic population. And so we started, this is 125th Street here, and the central core is where our bid boundaries are. So the 1990s, as I said, ended the crack wars. That's also when we got Giuliani, who came in with aggressive policing. And that aggressive policing was not only quality of life, but he literally put a police station just for drugs in the center of the drug environment, with 700 police coming in and out of there every day. So you know what happened? Most of the people just left, went somewhere else. We also had the controversy with Pathmark. It was the first grocery store to come into the area, and the bodegas felt threatened. And that was a major change for us in terms of the type of tenants we brought in. In the 2000, we had the Harlem Renaissance retail. We got our first mall to come to 125th Street. People start changing their thoughts about office towers, and we had started looking more at how much commercial space we had, but we were not getting Class A tenants. And lastly, we focused on office space on 125th Street expanding. In the 2010s is when we start getting the population shift and the word of gentrification starts surfacing to the top. What most people don't understand is that 60% of the properties prior to the 90s was owned by the city, from the abandonment of white flight and black flight after things got bad. So when we started building new houses, more people came in, but we were not having displacement at that time. We are having displacement now, and we'll talk about that later. And then comes Bill Clinton, which some people called him the ultimate gentrifier, and then others welcomed him warmly. I put this slide in to show you the transition of the retail on 125th Street. What was happening is people were leasing up commercial stores at the bottom, but nothing at the top, except they had one person living right here. 1989, 1993, it stayed that way. Then the advertisers started coming in and using this space to advertise. Here in 2011, this building was removed, and now today, this is where we get the Whole Foods and large development. The housing stock. Okay, when they start taking the properties off the tax rolls, we start getting these type of developments right here, like this. The brownstone still exists, and the public housing still exists in a big way. This right here is in construction now. It's going to be a Marriott with affordable housing, and Harlem has become very good at this. We started off first forcing the city to look at Harlem's AMI, the average median income, instead of the whole city's average median income. This project right here will have 3 tiers Harlem average median income. This is another formula we're trying to make sure that we have inclusion. So back to 1993 when we first started, okay? Everyone knows what this is. You all are dealing with the same thing. This is what we started with. How do we show the value of the money? The streetscape was in total disarray, unsafe conditions, and let's start with the crime. 1993, we had 40 murders. We had over 1,000 robberies. We had 1,000 felony assaults. We had 80 rapes. Today, our crime is down 74%. Last year we had 0 murders, only 3 rapes, 33 robberies. This comes from us working hand in hand on an ongoing basis with the police. My public safety director is a retired police officer, and that helps us with that relationships. Relationships with the police is very, very key. We had ongoing conflicts. Conflicts with commerce in Harlem has gone back to the 1930s, and it still exists. We still have it. We just try to manage it. So now 125th Street has become a successful business corridor. We get press coverage all the time, tracing the development. And also, too, we get the community concerns. 125th Street has been and still is known as the main street of the traditional capital of Black America. Michael Henry Adams walked the community all the time, and this is his mantra: Harlem is a place of importance that is of equal terms, in equal terms of Black history as Paris and Rome are to white history. So there's a big segment of the community that's really fighting to hold on to its history. Even the businesses themselves feel like the history and the culture is what makes this community thrive. Through all of this, the number of stores on 125th Street have continued to rise. In 2015, we had 210. We now have 237 on the ground level. The larger retail trends, our rents are continuing to go up while the city is continuing to go down. We had a big dip, but we're now back up to $140 a square foot. But you can see Bleecker Street, Flatiron, East Midtown, Midtown East, East 86, Broadway, all of them are down in terms of their rents, but 125th Street is still up. What contributed to this success? Okay, well, we have a great transportation hub. We have 4 bus lines and 10 subway lines that cross 125th Street, so that you have no problem getting there, you have no problem leaving, you can move around, and they're busy subways. We have 25 million people that use the number 4 subway lines and stop on 125th Street annually. We have a high density, people in walking distance to 125th Street, within half a mile, within 1 mile radius, and in central Harlem, the income density per acre is over $3 billion. The third ingredient is the 125th Street Business Improvement District. So our mission is to expand sustainable economic activity, maximize the ability of local residents to participate in the growth and improve the quality of life. Our programs, basically clean and safe, public safety, promotion, marketing and tourism, property owner and retail services. We do special events. Communication and membership engagement is important. Capital improvements, strategic planning, and advocacy. Keeping it clean. We put 23% of our budget into keeping it clean, and our clean programs are 7 days a week from 6 till 7. We have launched a community-wide clean campaign, which in the spring we challenged all of the community to clean within a certain time. And it's an online competition. They upload their work. We have community members that work with it, and we give them cash so they can clean some more. Our public safety program is only Monday to Friday. That's all we can afford right now. But it makes a difference. On weekends, we have a lot of people out. So we meet with the police on a regular basis, and our ambassadors are eyes and ears for the street. We do marketing and promotion, mostly through online promotions. And we do holiday lighting, which is a community event which turns 125th Street into a sea of lights. And we have community performances up and down the street. Property owner services, we try to help them to promote their properties and to recruit tenants. So we do vacancy studies, we do pedestrian footfalls, and we do maps that we do give to them. We do new goals every year, and our biggest goal this time is to revisit the cultural bonus. What the cultural bonus is we ask the city to bonus free space and give additional density so that we could bring in the culture and create small businesses. They did it, but they put parameters on it. That's not working, so we're going to go back to them. And this is how we get our money. With the formulas, I want you to see here, our formula is 1/2 of the assessed value of the individual property divided by the total assessed value of the area, plus 1/2 of the front footage of the individual property divided by the total front footage of the bid boundaries times the bid budget. So what you will see is someone who has a property with a frontage of 20, assessed value of $47,000, he will pay only $1,700. Whereas if you have someone who have a footage of 199 with an assessed value of $14 million, he pays $36,000. So this way we were able to, it took us a long time. It took us literally almost 6 months to come up with a formula that pleased everyone. And then we have all these properties down here who don't pay, who we would love for them to go away, but we can't get rid of them. So we have in our boundaries 100 properties, 12 are totally exempt, 9 is mixed use, and in the mixed use, only the part that's taxable by the city pays. 79 buildings are 100% taxable. How have these changes impacted 125th Street? Well, we're a stronger retail tenant corridor, but we're losing culture, such as the Lennox Lounge, which is the jazz club. Sorry. We're cleaner, we're safer, and we're cleaner. Remember the earlier pictures? We now have more investment from the city and the state in our cultural institutions, and the empowerment zone, which was created under President Clinton, also invests. We now have investment from Columbia University, and so now they're willing to pay, and we're looking at doing services for them. This was our first mall that came in, and all of these projects are in the ground right now. This is now, and this is what it's going to become. This is now, this is what it's going to become. This is now, this is what it's going to become. Same thing. All of these are in the ground right now, so the investment is happening for us. But the racial makeup is changing, and so now there are more whites, there are more Hispanics, there are more Asians, and the black population is decreasing. There's explosive growth in the population and the aging, people who are aging are leaving. The median household income is increasing. And we are getting that gentrification effect. You can see where we are with the rest of the city. So the changes are now changing the street scene, and we are getting articles now, is Harlem going to be the next 34th Street? We feel it won't, because we are committed to bringing in the culture and creating businesses that gave us the funkiness that brought everybody to us in the first place. We do not want to become everywhere else. We want to keep the soul, Magnus. We want to keep the soul in Harlem so that people keep coming. And how do we integrate that in with the return on investment? So we're looking at right now, how do we make 125th Street sticky, and defining what stickier means. And what that means to us is when you come, we want you to stay. And if you come and you stay, what are you going to enjoy and what are you going to do while you're there? We are looking at new businesses. Sylvia's is still there. She's continuing to service soul food. We're looking at the fashion that's now coming out of Harlem. We have new young African restaurants that's serving soul food. And of course, we have Marcus. You gave us Marcus with Red Rooster, and he's bringing culture. But then we also have businesses like this, who are young whites who have moved into Harlem and decided that they did not want to keep leaving Harlem to eat, and so they're now opening up businesses. So what essential elements need to be preserved, nurtured, or attractive? Accepting and embracing change while keeping 125th Street special is our challenge, and we feel that we're up to the challenge. No one wants to become 34th Street in Harlem. That's just the newspapers. We've stopped talking to newspapers about that because we feel if we came from the 80s to where we are now, we have a chance, we have a shot. Gentrification is something that we all hear and we run from, but we never look at how it's happening. How it happened to us is we didn't prepare for the growth, nor did we prepare our residents for the growth. So I will say to you is that you should continue to do your bid-inspired or bid-like organizations with the goal to become bids. What does it take to get your legislators to give you the legislation? And I think starting to understand enabling. Elected officials are enabling you to, under certain rules and criteria for transparency, accountability, and effectiveness. Because if you don't have that, it's always difficult to deliver, and eventually people just stop paying the money. If I don't have my audit in on December 31st by 5 o'clock every year, it triggers an automatic audit from the city. We don't want them coming in, so we're all running around making sure we do it. If there's something in that audit that is not right, the controller is coming in. There's no better partner than the city. They already have everything in place to be able to make your organization better. You are on the ground on a daily basis, ongoing. The city can't do that. So some kind of way you have to find the advantage for both that they are a part of. I don't know if there are any elected officials in here, but I work with them. Elected officials need to know that they are important. One of my little strategies is I develop a program and I call them on the phone and say, I got something that's going to make you look good. I do the work and I give it to them. You know, you have to find a way to, because the goal is you want to grow your district, and it's not about you. You want to grow your district, you want to be accountable, you want to succeed every year, not one year. I'll stop and take some questions if that's where y'all want to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. You were extremely efficient. You made it in half an hour, which leaves us plenty of time for questions. I would like to have some assistance with microphones, if I may, if there's someone in the audience who would like to ask questions, which I encourage you to do. Så ställ frågor. Kan inte på engelska så översätter jag, så det är allt är lugnt. Ja, Ulrika, vi har en kvalificerad mikrofon. Barbara, were you ever met with criticism during your bid work?
Yes, all the time, all the time. One of the first criticism was creating a business improvement district. The community felt that this is just something to help businesses and it's not going to help us because we had a lot of social problems. So one of the, what we call the matriarchs of Harlem, she literally took me from a meeting and said, walk with me. And she took me in front of the Apollo Theater and she said, mark my word, under the marquee of the Apollo Theater, there will be no BID in Harlem. And literally for me, that was the first challenge. I was like, I'm gonna show you. I didn't tell her that, but I'm gonna show you. It's gonna happen. And so I had to educate the community about what it was and the benefits, literally join the community board. The next challenge was the informal vendors on the street, because everyone saw the white businesses trying to push the black businesses out, where the reality is Harlem never owned, people of color never owned the properties. Even people left, but they didn't get rid of their property. They were in estates or whatever, so they never owned. The newspapers don't tell this story either. So we literally came up with a solution. We had 11,000 vendors, 1,100 vendors in 3 blocks, and it was killing the district. And we decided to do a flea market. We looked for 74 sites, and nobody in Harlem wanted those sites to go to them. They didn't want the vendors in front of their area. But when we put them in a site that was maybe about 15 blocks away, we were criticized for pushing the black businesses on the side. And so for us, we just sometimes have to take a hit. We know what the truth is, but it would have gotten worse for us to try to explain it, because it would have been us against the whole community. It's the same way with the gentrification issue. Just last week, I got a call, do a television show on why 125th Street is doing so good, don't have vacancies, and they turned it into a gentrification story and ran it the whole weekend. And so I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? And I decided that I'm going to start having conversations, frank talks, where I start re-educating people in terms of what's going on. So with the criticism, some of it has been written in books or whatever, and everyone is telling me I need to write a book and tell my own story, but it goes with the territory. You're going to get it. I think that knowing you're doing the right thing is what gets you through it, and talking to the people who listen.
Yeah, so you walk the talk, and you've served as an interface between different groups of people. And so what of your personal traits and personliga karaktärsdrag would you say have been the most important ones that lead to success?
I think staying committed to the community, literally being involved with the community. The people who took care of me were those street people sitting on the streets. You know, when I would walk out there, they would call me, hey sis, he's the one doing it over there. They became my eyes and ears. People who saw the work I was doing, they wouldn't talk in front of a lot of other people, but they became an ally because they saw I was doing good work. You know, I told this to Magnus. Magnus wanted me to share this with you. When we started, we had number joints. I don't know if you know what number joints are. It's where you go and you play illegal numbers, and you win, you get a big chunk of money. And so we had number joints that were part of our retail mix, and people would be sitting behind bulletproof glass with marijuana joint in one hand and counting their money. It's just piles of money. So here I come. Hello, I'm Barbara Askins, and I'm fanning away the marijuana. I'm creating a business improvement district here on 125th Street and stuff. So eventually, people start realizing, and I kept coming, and I kept going. Every day I would go and I would knock, and eventually they started to trust me. And I think having a leader that take that committee, I go to all the community meetings. I go to the police committee meetings. When I walk in the room, oh, that bid is here again. Yes, this bid is here again. Stand connected to the community because they give you the solutions, and you need the support. Because once the businesses see you got the community behind you, then well, for us, anyway, they always ask me, what is the community saying? If we're going to do this, are we going to get opposition? Because you don't want a protest in front of your store. That takes away dollars from you. So we never lost our connection to the community.
So you got to love people, right?
You have to love people.
So
well, I'm from Louisiana. Yeah. We love Louisiana. We love food and people.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
We gave us Marcus. We gave you Marcus.
Yes.
Now we want him back.
You want him back?
Now you can have him.
Well, you can take him back, but you can't take away Plug-In Monday. Plug-In Monday is when Marcus organized all of the sounds, and it's like open mic with just unbelievable talent. It's just packed every Monday night and stuff. So you can have him, but we're going to keep that.
Yeah, good. So that's also an added attraction to the food as such.
It is.
So I also say fearlessness would be one of the traits.
Fearlessness
and presence and holding your ground.
Fearlessness and faith. I mean, creating a business improvement district made me, I always believed in God, but there are just so many times when it's just you. It's just you trying to move in a direction that's merely just in your head. And would it all come into fruition? Like everybody is saying, Barbara, how did you do it? Well, this is 20 years worth of work. It's all starting to happen now. Some of those projects have been on the drawing board for 10, 15 years. But continuing to have faith and belief and seeing that it can happen, it's just a must, because you get setbacks all the time. This is why every July I come up with a project that I can get done right away, so I can show my property owners I did something every year, because you are going to get setbacks all the time. Yes.
So count your successes and honor them.
Yes.
Yeah,
honor them and shout them loudly.
Yes.
Yes.
So, questions? Yes. Vi får gärna presentera er också, det är bara kul.
Hello.
Hello.
Is it on? Okay, thank you very much.
Ska se, jag tror att den är av faktiskt. Jag ska ta. Ni vet hur det är. Ja.
I can just raise my voice.
Ja, du kan. Vi ser om det funkar.
Okay, no? Yes. My name is Conor Ovlen. I'm from University of Gothenburg. Thank you very much for an exciting presentation.
Thank you.
I meant to ask you, both you and Helena talked about the importance of having an enabling legislation. But at the same time, I imagine that it would have been difficult to get the necessary votes unless you first had done the prior work with the Merchants Association and the corporation. So if we would get an enabling legislation, would that be a short circuit to get the bids in place, or would that just be an enabler to take the last step? Would we facilitate the actual journey, so to say, or would we need the same amount of time? Thank you.
Okay, sure. Some can and some cannot. Again, you have to look at your neighborhood. Like in Harlem, no way. There's no way we would have had to do the work. But Downtown Alliance, which was Wall Street, they hired the past executive director of the city's economic development organization and wrote a check for $50,000, and they did it in 6 months because they had all the clout to push on the governor and the mayor and make it happen. You know, so if you have a group of owners who want to pay the money and work it through and use that clout, you can do that. Usually in smaller neighborhoods, it takes convincing. It takes convincing to pay that additional tax. Yeah. But you need the legislation, because the legislation brings transparency. Remember, first thing with the Merchants Association, so I call this frank talk here. People are going to always think you're stealing the money, okay? We're going to talk frank. What's happening to the money? I gave you this last time. You said you was putting some lights up. I saw a few little lights out there. Did everybody pay? You got that just twirling around all the time. So you have to convince them. One of the things that I did was I wouldn't collect any money until I had a program. to spend the money on to show them. And I went in saying, give me a shot, give me a shot. I can do it. I tell you, I promise you, I can do it. Let me show you what we could do. I would collect the money, I would do the program, and I would go sit down and show them the books because, you know, they just don't understand. They're running their store and their business. And sometimes they, in their head, they're expecting to see some great explosion even though they gave you $10, you know. So you have to explain, you know, what you're doing and how you're doing it.
So distinct proposals help. You serve people with, this is what we plan to do.
Always,
Yeah.
always, always, yes.
Ja. Enabling är ett ord som dyker upp, jag vet inte, jag säger möjliggöra betyder det, det är ju också som en röd tråd att man möjliggör det, just translation.
Yeah, I just want to say with the legislation, our legislation dictated that the number of property owners has to be greater than the total numbers of the other groups on your board. And that's because they're the ones paying. So that you can use that to show you have a greater vote. If someone comes in and say, you know, well, we want this to happen, you don't want it to happen, you have that vote. You also have, you create your own bylaws. It allows us to create our own bylaws that tells how you want to operate and how you want your district to be governed. So that's what the enabling legislation does. It gives you the power to self-assess yourself and also to self-operate with oversight from the city, because once it becomes a law, somebody has to make sure you do it. And that's what the city does from the mayor's office through the Department of Small Business Services, is check our district plan and make sure we're doing everything that's in there. If you want to do something that you didn't vote on, you have to go back and amend that plan. All of that is in the enabling legislation. So if you put in your district plan, I want to do clean and safe, and then you want to come back and build a railroad, no, you got to go back and start over. They're not going to let you just take this and run away and keep taxing people to do what you didn't say you're going to do. And that's why you need some legislation.
So a bylaw would be an example of a bylaw that's adherent to you?
Oh, yes. So bylaws basically tells you how to operate. You got to have president, secretary, treasurer, you know, who can vote, who can sign checks, the fiscal operating procedures, that kind of thing. Yes.
Okay. On me? Yes.
Hi, my name is Johanna Talje.
Hi, Johanna.
We are working with, coming from the bid in Stigbergstorget, it's kind of west parts of Gothenburg. And it's so inspiring because we are struggling and we need the force to get us going more.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, what kind of organization do you have around you?
Okay.
And how did you have it in the beginning and now?
Okay. So with the local development corporation, we had a lot of community people, a lot of people who don't pay. And that's a bad model because they want everything and they're not paying, and it runs away the people who do pay. So, but they're the ones that created a steering committee. So it was community people, elected officials, some not-for-profits that were very well known in the city, some business owners, but a few. That was the local development corporation. When we created the steering committee, and this was key for us, we created our steering committee to get the votes. So we put our 51% of the votes on the steering committee. So, and we put more in case some of them pulled out. We would know we had to bid once we got through the process. Now that we're a business improvement district, we have, my board is larger than I wanted it to be, 32. And out of those 32, I think 17 are property owners. Then we have commercial tenants. We have representative of residential tenant, 4 elected officials, the mayor, the controller, the city council, and the borough president, who are voting members. And they must serve on the finance and audit committees. Then we have the neighborhood people to keep the peace. We do have them on the board as non-voting members. We don't tell them that. We let them vote. And, you know, it's just not, let them vote. It just doesn't go into record. But it's like, according to the record, they're in the non-voting category. So, but that helps us to keep the community involved. You have to, as they say, CYA, you know, CYA, cover your ass,
Yeah.
you know. So we put those things in to keep the peace. But our board, basically, who we have around us are the owners of the property. So in structuring and operating, I keep property owners and tenants away from each other because you get nothing done in that meeting. So, you know, except for the board meeting. So I have property owner services with meetings of property owners who only they can come to. I have a retail think tank where only retailers can come to that. And we meet with the police department, the commanding officer with each group separately, and then with myself. Because I tried it the other way, putting them all in the room, and you never know when a property owner is not going to renew somebody's lease, and it just destroys your whole meeting. And so I have found it more effective to just keep the groups separate and then come together at the full board meetings.
Ooh, diplomacy at its finest, and a very un-Swedish model, wouldn't you say? Everything is not, you know, copy-paste strictly applicable, but thanks for the eye-opener. And so we also understand that this building a structure such as this, in a legal sense and also in a collaborative sense, is complicated, complex work that takes a long time to establish. Yeah.
It takes a long time to establish if you don't have the buy-in. It took me 3 years. And one of the reasons is because we were doing the wrong thing. We were trying to do the street construction and create a bid at the same time. So while the street was all dug up, no one wanted to hear about paying an additional assessment. So that's something we learned. You can't do the two together. But having at least one dedicated person that is out there knocking doors. My morning was I would go in 9 to 12, and I would do all the paperwork. From 12 to 5, I was outside knocking on doors, calling, talking to business owners, showing them. Each and every day, I would knock, and I was out there, and I was talking to them. And I took the step of everybody that said no, I had a no list, put them on the side. Everybody that said yes, I treated them like they were gold. So then people would say, well, how come you gave him? Well, he said yes, he talks to me. So eventually I start showing favoritism to the yes people, and then more of the no people start coming on board. It is, so I should tell you that before starting the Business Improvement District, I worked for this company called Helen Newhouse Consulting, and we did public involvement on transportation, facility planning, and environmental projects. And we had certification in 35 states. And so what we did was took technical information from the city and the government, and we rewrote it so that we could communicate it to the communities in order for them to move projects forward. So I was able to take some of those things we learned, particularly primary targets, secondary targets, tertiary targets, and learning how to communicate with them. So I guess I had a little bit of an advantage. Yeah.
Hard earned. In a way too.
Yes, yes.
Vi hinner en fråga till, om någon har.
Oh, we take a picture.
Maybe there were two som räckte upp. I'll just give the mic to someone else because you had your... But thanks for being active. We love it. Jacob.
Thank you. Jakob Ebnam is my name. I'm from the county government board of Dalarna. We have been working with a bit and been visiting you with our mayors, and
yes,
it was very exciting. You talk a lot about give good advices, and we see that there is a lot of knowledge in the bid managers. They have to manage a lot of things. And when we were working with smaller places, we have seen that it was very difficult to get these bid managers that know everything, that can convince the municipality, convince the property owners, and work efficiently. So what would be your advice to a consortium that want to start a bid? How should they recruit a bid manager?
The first thing is you look for not skill set, but passion for that neighborhood. You know, I fell in love with Harlem, and if you check all of the bid managers, you're going to find that. You look at Tim Thompson, he has passion for Times Square. It's because you are, basically you become the face of that neighborhood. Solutions, okay, so let's just talk about the structure for bids, okay. We have bid managers associations, and we have the International Downtown Association, you have the Canadian Association. Any director that picks up the phone and calls any of us from anywhere all over the world, we're going to take that call. The whole bid structure is to support. There are online forums. You join the International Downtown Association, you just go type in a question. I need to find out how to do this. Has anyone done it? You'll get 20, 30 answers from everywhere. So the skill set can be taught, but the passion and the commitment, you know, to that area, to making that happen. So when I was interviewed, the guy who interviewed me never talked to me. He had me to come in, he got on the phone, and I was getting totally frustrated. So literally, I just took out my briefcase and I started working. And I forgot I was in his office. So about 40 minutes later, he looked at me and he said, "You look like you're aggressive enough to do this." He's like, I forgot he was here. So if you can make this happen, then you can become the president of the corporation. And that was my impetus for doing it. So analyzing the type of character that person have, and the commitment, because this job is going to require more than an 8-hour job. There are going to be times when you work countless hours. I mean, I've worked sometimes 2 days straight. Just go home, take a shower, and come back. It's the commitment and the desire to grow that neighborhood. And so it's not easy to find that person, but they're out there. You'll find a lot of people who want the job, but that have that commitment to changing that neighborhood, and also the strength to face adversity. You know, because you are going to, you're changing behavior, you're changing mindsets from all levels. And so that's going to take a lot of strength.
So I bow to authority. Barbara Askins, ladies and gentlemen. Wow.